tie together to make more sense out of the information we have.
Great, thank you. Would you be able to make a list of that for me so that we can try and ask for that information?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Let's go to what we call voter data analysis, and because this ties in directly with the canvassing, our contract, the Senate contract with you, and your proposal for work, and one of those items was canvassing, to be able to actually verify if you found any information, and the only or best way to verify it is to actually go to that person. And I've always used the example because I do know of a case where one house got 25 ballots in the mail and only 2 people lived there. And so we had talked about how do we verify that, and there was a question about canvassing. Department of Justice sent us a letter about 4 or 6 weeks ago and said, we're concerned about you actually knocking on doors, that you might, might be voter intimidation or civil rights violation or something, which I find is interesting after the White House last week said we're going to knock on doors to see whether you're vaccinated or not. But that's a side point, just a little side point. But so we told the Department of Justice that we would postpone that indefinitely until your audit was at a point where we could even determine whether that was going to be necessary or not. So can you talk to us about that, and is it going to be necessary? Is it not? Go into that part for me, please.
Yeah, based on the data we're seeing, I highly recommend we do the canvassing, because it's the one way to know for sure whether some of the data we're seeing, if it's real problems or whether it's clerical errors of some sort. So for example, we have 74,243 mail-in ballots where there is no clear record of them being sent. And just to be clear, here in the state of Arizona, there's EV32s and EV33s. EV32s is supposed to give a record of when a mail-in ballot is sent, and an EV33 is supposed to give a record of when the mail-in ballot is received. And so there should be an equal, there should be more EV32s, more sent out than there are that are received. Specifically with these, we can tie them to a specific individual that was mailed to. And so we have 74,000 where we have them came back from individuals where we don't have a clear indication that they were ever sent out to them. That could be something where documentation wasn't done right. There was a clerical issue. There's not proper things there. But I think when we've got 74,000, it merits knocking on a door and validating some of this information.
So, Madam President, if I may, Mr. Logan, what are you looking at where you see this, where there's 72,000 received but not 72,000 sent? What did you guys look at to come up with that?
So there was information that was FOIA'd from the county, specifically in these EV32 and EV34 or 33 forms. And that is what gives an account of what was sent out and what was received back.
This is the data you received from a FOIA request back
Correct.
From the county.
Members of our team received back, correct.
And you're saying that the EV33, which is the number of ballots received, was higher than the number of ballots
We are
sent.
not seeing an equivalent EV32 to go along with EV34, or 33, I'm sorry, I keep doing this up. We're not
32
seeing
and 33.
32 and 33, we're
Okay.
not seeing them where they match up, because there should be a matchup of them. Obviously, you're going to have more mail-in ballots sent out than are ever
Right.
returned, but specifically, these should match up with each other.
Okay.
Is there another way to get that information? How would you verify that? Is there another way to get that information if what you have seen so far doesn't make sense? How can we verify? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, we could request information from the U.S. Postal Service on what was, went through the mail system. There's additional records about if mail-in ballots were in fact rejected and returned. That information, would be useful in sorting through some of this as well. There's a number of different things associated with artifacts that are created when mail-in ballots are sent.
Okay, thank you. Continue.
Okay. So we have also seen some interesting things related to the voter rolls. So for example, we have 11,326 people that did not show up on a November 7th version of the voter rolls that should have been after votes were cast, but then appeared on the December 4th voter rolls. And just be clear, they show as voted in this past election, but they were not a November 7th version of the file, and they did show up on the December 4th version.
Okay, that sounds confusing.
I-
Give me an explanation of why that might have, I mean, we're not saying there's fraud, we're not saying anything else. I'm just trying to find answers. Is there a logical explanation why that would be?
I cannot think of a logical explanation on what that would be, but it'd be a great thing to hear back from the county to see if there's anything that we're not thinking of.
Okay, thank you. Continue.
So we have, from what I understand here in Arizona, they originally Hobbs had requested that the registration date for voting be moved up to election day, and there was actually a court case that moved it back to October 15th. Based on the registration information that we found in the voter rolls, we have 3,981 individuals who show as having voted in this election, and their data shows up in the canvas as having voted in this election. However, they were registered after October 15th.
So what we would need is, again, so all of these, Madam President, so all of these are things that canvassing, we could find out, did they register before, did they even vote? Or we need some more data, we need more data from the county to show they registered before that date. Something showing that they registered before October 15th, or something showing that these, their ballots were sent out to people where they were received. Or we need to do a canvass. We need to be doing canvassing to ask the voters themselves.
Okay, continue.
The last one I have is we have roughly 20,000, I think it was about actually closer to 18,000, who voted in the election and then showed as being removed from the voter rolls soon after the election. So they were on the voter rolls, they showed as voted, and then they were removed. And there could be a good logical explanation for that, but it seems like a large number to immediately have after an election be removed. And so getting more documentation on the request to remove from voter rolls or other process to make sure that makes sense seems logical. In addition, again, knocking on doors and canvassing can help validate that information.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, besides knocking on doors, how would we also obtain that information? Secretary of State, voter rolls, Maricopa County, or knocking on doors is the only way to do it? I don't understand.
Well, the original voting records are kept at the county level. That is shared electronically on a daily basis with the Secretary of State's office. It keeps a statewide voter database. The Secretary of State's office receives information from vital records and other courts and et cetera, that is then in kind of reverse sent to the county levels to let the counties know who's died, who's been adjudicated in a court hearing as being incompetent or lost their voting rights because of a felony conviction or something like that. So I guess we could look at almost daily data between the county and the Secretary of State's office.
All right, thank you. Continue.
That's actually the last thing I have to cover from this section.
Okay. Envelopes, that's an issue that we've been talking about. Would you like to touch on that as well?
Yeah, we've had an affidavit that specifically stated that when mail-in ballots were received, that so many of them were received, that the standards reduced over time. They originally talked about there was initially 20 points of comparison on the signature, and then after some time they're told to go to 10 points of signature, 10 points of comparison, then 5, and then eventually they were just told to let every single mail-in ballot through. So we think it's important. I understand with the course of our settlement, the only thing we can look at is blank signatures, but we think it's important to get the mail-in ballot images and see how many, if any, blank signatures came through, because that could have a material impact on the election.
Okay. Do we not have those images of the envelopes?
We do not have those images. Maricopa County has stated that they provided us with images of the envelopes, but specifically the folder they pulled into us on a specific drive has to do with voter registration details. It does not appear to have anything to do with the receiving of ballots. And I believe that, Bennett can tell you more about his interchanges with them, but specifically we asked them, so are you saying that in that folder we should have the envelopes that were utilized for ballots to be delivered in this past election? And the answer was basically there's envelopes in that folder, and it did not clearly answer our question.
So, Mr. Bennett, when you asked them or advised them that maybe they're mistaken, they're not here, could you send it again, or what was said?
I would simply recommend Madam President, that they be re-subpoenaed as almost maybe a separate item and on a separate device, and it's not commingled with other folders or anything else.
But I guess her question is, what has been their response when you ask for, we need the images of the ballots.
Envelopes.
We need the images of the envelopes that were mailed. They said they gave us a file. It's not on the file. When you ask, you tell them we don't have those. What is the response? What has the response been to you?
It's on the Lacey 5 terabyte hard drive in a affidavits folder that's 1.83 terabytes big. And we keep looking for it and don't find it.
If I might add, I did an extensive forensic search for the mail-in ballots. The only images that are contained on the referenced Lacey drive are the original voter registration affidavits. Nothing to do with mail-in ballots.
Thank you. Okay. So we will put that on the list of things to ask for. All right, so that brings us right into that list. Mr. Peterson, I'm going to let you take over at this point.
Well, I think, Madam President, you and I just, we talked about so you've done a good job of letting us know what we've done, what's completed so far. We've heard a few things that we're missing. The President and I would like to know if you can tell us, just if you can kind of summarize or go through, tell us what do you guys need based off of what you've learned so far to have a complete forensic audit where we can have a complete and final report. So if you can share with us, what are those things that you would need to do that?
I think one of the key things that Mr. Cotton has talked about is we really need the Splunk logs in order to validate there was not any remote access to those systems in order to confirm any type of remote connectivity. And we request
So we've covered that. I mean, anything that hasn't been mentioned already in the hearing. Do you have anything that because we've written, I believe the President and I have written all those things down. Is there anything that we haven't brought up that you would need to make this where you feel like it's a complete audit?
Yeah, so specifically when we talk about those changes to the voter rolls we talked about, and there's additional things we've seen that have changed in voter rolls over time that should not change. I think it would be very helpful if we could get a full backup copy of the database of voter rolls, specifically with information about who it was that made changes and when, and IP addresses and those details, so we can drill into why it is that some of these changes have taken place. I think we talked about chain of custody already. That's something that's extremely important for us to validate the chain of custody of everything from the point where the first ballot was sent to the point where we received stuff. We have full chain of custody of what we've covered, while it's been in our custody, but we need to know of it prior to that.
Okay.
So we understand that there may be some systems associated with the duplication of ballots that we have not forensically looked at. And as we've seen problems with duplication, if we're able to have access to those, we believe it would be very valuable in seeing what might be going on.
So what do you mean? What specifically, what are you looking for there?
Well, there's some software, I believe it's called Novus, that's used as part of the duplication process. There was actually a court case, I believe it was Ward via Jackson, where it was discovered that some of that duplication was not properly attributing results for the candidate the original had. And so being able to forensically look at that information would be helpful. And based on some analysis that Mr. Cotton has done, he does not see that within any of the data sets that we currently have. And so the question is whether the original subpoena was worded as such that we should have received that, or whether this is something that needs to be in a new request.
Okay. Anything else?
So any reports associated with the breach that is known about of the voter rolls with Maricopa County, that again will help with investigation that Mr. Cotton is putting together.
To be clear, you're talking about the breach that happened in the Maricopa County, sent letters out to the voters and saying, please be aware, our system's been hacked or breached, and
Yes, ma'am.
we believe none of your personal information has been disclosed. That letter, that breach.
Correct.
Okay.
There's been minimal public information available about that, and any internal reports on what was discovered, the levels of the breach, and how far would be very helpful in our analysis as to whether the voting systems were impacted this election cycle.
Now, you weren't here at the time. I don't know if you know, Mr. Bennett. Do you remember, is this the same breach as the one where the FBI raided that house?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know.
Doug
Yes,
is
ma'am, I
nodding.
believe so.
Mr. Logan, okay.
And, Mr. Cotton, I don't know if you want to chime in
I
on that.
believe that to be the same.
Okay, thank you.
So specifically, we'd like to request all portable media or external hard drives that contained election definitions, election results, backups, or similar data. We know from photos that we've seen from MTech that there was at least 3 orange drives, of which we received 1 of them. And reviewing the wording of the subpoena, portable media and external drives may not have been included if you were trying to take a very narrow view of what we requested. We believe there will be backups and other information that will be helpful in our analysis on those.
Okay.
So you need us to subpoena the 2 missing orange drives, missing
Well, I
drives?
think
Or
we
any
worded
any
it
portable
as any
drives.
portable media or external drives that have not been given prior subpoenas.
Thank
They're
you.
associated with the election specifically.
Thank you.
We don't need any of the information we've already seen, so most of this stuff we've put caveats that we don't need things we already received. As we've heard the report that the election department shares a network with the sheriff's department, it'd be very helpful to have the network diagram to show how that is, and from our analysis standpoint, it'll make it easier for Mr. Cotton to hone in on what happened, and again, to look at things. I think we already talked about the backups of election management data. Digital copies of all versions of policies and procedures utilized associated with the election would be helpful. We've received verbal reports from a number of people that work for Maricopa County that indicate that some of the things we've seen don't actually comply with Maricopa County's policies and procedures, but without a copy of those, it's difficult for us to validate those. And we want to make sure that, any finding we put into our report is something that would be irrefutable, and we have the hard evidence to back it up. So getting those policies and procedures would be helpful in doing so.
Question, if I might. Question. Why would those not be public record and already produced somewhere? If they're procedures, election procedures?
Well, some levels of them are public and are available. But when I looked into specifically trying to see some of the ballot storage requirements and how they should be stored specifically as an example, there was not very detailed information. And usually you have guidance from a state, and then within a county they'll have very specific, their interpretation of how they execute it. It's one of the reasons why it's so valuable with an audit to be able to have conversations with people, because there's things they do in Maricopa County they don't do like that way anywhere else in the country. And not all those are necessarily wrong. It's not about right or wrong. It's just different. So getting their policies and procedures so we know them and we're aware of them is something that's helpful. And some of that information they did send over with the original subpoenas. But there's additional, like I said, when I went through them, there's enough things that we ran through that I couldn't find specific documentation on that we were told they had specific guidance on, and we'd like copies of that.
Okay, so so through inferences, they're told they know how to do this. Well, how do we know how to do this? It's not in the procedure manuals. We need where they're getting this guidance and training.
Correct.
Okay.
And most governmental organizations have very clear and very precise policies and procedures for pretty much everything that's done. And so it should be something that's easy to procure. So we mentioned before about the blue sheets. Since we received these through another party, we'd like to specifically subpoena them so we know we have the official copies of them. They call them the tabulation logs. That was the official name that they utilized in them. And so that's, again, just to make sure that what we have is valid and real. We have no reason to expect that it's not, but it's just good to get it officially. Tied in with some of the things we ran into on the voter rolls, records of all mailed out ballots, everything that's available as far as what's mailed out and what was rejected, and validation that they were destroyed if they were rejected and came back. I've got a lot of things in here. They're specific to that, but for the brevity, we'll. So we'd like copies of all files transmitted for the purpose of duplicating damaged ballots or alternate format ballots, specifically to help us trace some of this information to make sure everything matches up and that it followed appropriately, because for things to be printed by a printer at Runbeck on duplicate ballots, they had to send a request over to them of some format and some data, and we'd like to be able to match that up with everything that we have. We talked about the records of all paper distributed to vote centers and so forth. So additional information associated with adjudication of ballots would be helpful as we do our analysis on those and make sure that that conforms with expectations, that votes were cast over as far as what the process was, who was involved in it, and how they validated things with that. Specifically, we'd like information about the total count of all ballots sent to UOCAVA eligible voters, how they were sent and how they were received, because there's a number of different ways those votes can be received back. And we have some of the numbers with UOCAVA seem a little off, seem a little anomalous, and we'd like to get more documentation on that to make sure that we can have, if there's any anomalies that merit going into a report, that we have the information to know whether it belongs or doesn't. I think that's pretty much everything here. If we're talking about things generically, there's more specifics that I have listed, but.
Okay. Do we have more questions?
I don't at this point. I think I'm gonna have to circle back with them to get this list. I won't be able to make heads or tails out of
I'll
my
send you the document.
my quick chicken scratching there. So I'll get a clear. Go ahead.
So, I think if you don't have any questions, Madam President, I don't have any more questions. Maybe just some closing statements here. Just back to what you said about working together. It is unfortunate that the county has been recalcitrant. That doesn't breed trust. It slows things down. It makes things difficult. We'd like to work together with them. We'd like to be able to get answers with to questions, and we'd like to get everything we need to finish the audit, more than anything. Obviously, some of these things can just, they could probably answer. Some of these procedural things, working together, we could just get answers to. But I think there's some really important things that we have been brought up today, that we need to get if we want to have a complete, full forensic audit. If we don't get them, it will be an incomplete report. It will be an incomplete audit, and that's what the findings will reflect. So I think, in addition to what he's mentioned in additional things, we need to get we've got to get the chain of custody. We have to get the routers or reports. It's safe. Experts say it's safe. Limit the report to what we're asking for or what we're needing. Put it on paper, whatever you need to do. We need to get those logs, and we need to get that report. We need to get the tokens to the machines. We need to be able to see how they were configured, and we need to hear back. We need to know for certain. The appearances is that administration resides with a third party. We need to hear back whether that's the case or not. We need to know. And what we need to do in the future is we need to make sure that administration resides with the state. Administration resides with the county. We need to get the envelopes.
Signatures.
Yeah, we need to get the envelopes for the mail ballots. We've been told we have them. It seems like somebody could either walk over and show us where that's at, or they can bring it to us, or give it to us. So we need to get that, and then of course we'll get, if you can send us that list. We did our best to write those things down, but we'll get the list, and I think from my perspective, that's kind of the two ways this is going to go. It'll either be an incomplete forensic audit with the findings and the things that we've got so far, or it will be incomplete if we don't have those items.
Thank you. Once again, I just want to state that that at no time have we ever implied or inferred that there was any intentional misdoings here in any way whatsoever. And in fact, we certainly hope not. But we do need to have this information and answer these questions so that we can make sure that the voters of Arizona have solid answers as to how our election systems works, the check and balances, to know that they have a safe and secure ballot when it comes in. So we will be asking for this additional information. We'll find out whether, I'm guessing we're going to have to go back to court unless Maricopa County will say, yes, let's work on this together, which I thought we would do. I do not know why Maricopa County has fought this so hard. If it's their electoral system, I would think they would want to know that everything is operating the way it should, and I believe that our Secretary of State would feel the same way. So we will endeavor to keep getting the answers. What do they say? The whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. And we'll move forward and get whatever we can to help you finish this audit. So we appreciate you flying in for this. We appreciate the time that you've put here, and we'll just keep moving forward. Now, before we adjourn, I would like security to please escort these three men out. For security reasons, we were instructed that we need to let them out first. Thank you all very much for attending. We appreciate you being here, and we'll just keep moving